Charity Gaming Guild proudly brings to you
The Charity Gaming Guild presents
The Charity Gaming Guild presents
the
Nat
Pun
Pun
Podcast.
Hello everybody and welcome to episode 2 of our community topics. This evening, night, day, afternoon, morning, whenever you might be listening, I am joined by John.
Hi.
Andy.
Hello.
And Ash.
Hello.
And yes, I remembered their names this time. Score one for me. And I'm Bertie, by the way. I'm your host for this episode. So this time we are going to be focusing on a topic that's been brought to us by our community, is the 6 P's of DMing. However, given timing, we're not going to focus on all 6. No. We're going to focus on 3 of the P's this time, so you can wait in anticipation for the other 3 P's next time. The P's, get ready to hear that a lot, that we'll be focusing on today are preparation, pacing, and presentation. So first off, we're looking at preparation. So some of the things that this falls under is story arc. For example, writing the adventure and the overall narrative. How do you tackle that starting afresh, or do you pull from something previously available?
Steal it.
Steal it, okay.
I second stealing it.
Stealing it,
I steal most of what I write.
yeah. And is that you source it from somewhere else that's similar, or just fully rip it off?
Yeah.
You have to
How
answer
can I
honestly.
answer? Yeah.
Somewhere in between. So I very rarely run pre-written adventures.
Okay.
Normally I'm writing something fresh and new every time for the charity. And most of the premise of what we're doing will be taken from somewhere else and then maybe tweaked or reflavoured or changed. So if you were to really sort of dig down into some of what has actually happened on a broad narrative scale, it would be very similar to something else that may exist in the world.
What about you, John? For your preparation?
A mix of, in terms of coming up with that story arc, stealing is always a good one, steal and tweak. I also I've read quite a lot around story structures and things like that. There's only about 14 things. Like, you watch films, they're either going to get something or they're going to kill the bad guy, or there's only so many of those, and I love a template for things. So you typically go, well, what do they want to do? What do they want? Like, what do I want this adventure to do? Which one of those fits? And then pick that and then start from there.
Okay. So when it comes to writing the story, do you focus on the whole thing of where it's going, or do you just pick out certain points that you want it to get to? Will you write the lore for it as well, or just go, this should happen, this should happen, this should happen, and leave the rest free?
I tend to start with what I want the end to be.
Okay.
Which, weirdly, it sounds a bit railroady, I suppose, but if I know that at the end of this adventure I want them to get some artifact to return to somebody, because that leads on to the next thing, that's where I start, and everything else I plan the adventure has to be generally driving towards that. Lots of options to get there, but ultimately, if all of those choices drive towards that one thing, that end story part, which is the important bit, happens.
Okay. And then do you really flesh out the bits before, or do you just leave them relatively vague?
It depends. So for me, I've found with the DMing that I've done, I need a description of whatever the scene is, I need whatever the obstacle is for that, and I need whatever the reward is. So there's, if you're walking into whatever it is, a tavern, and they've got to get some info from the barkeep, it would be, here's the description of the tavern, the sticky tables and the crappy lighting, and the orc sitting in the corner and the dwarves over there, the barkeep, and highlight those things that I want the players to interact with. And then if I've mentioned in my description the barkeep, a group of orcs in the corner, and a cellar door, realistically that's what the players are going to go and poke, one of those things. So I make sure I know what each of those things do.
Nice. How about you, Andy?
I don't think I've ever actually run a campaign, and in part that's because I put my hand up. I don't have either the imagination to create an ongoing story arc, or the patience to run an ongoing story arc. So I tend to focus more on one shots, and I put my hand up. I will look for resources online. A lot of it's paid. There are a lot of adventure books and prepaid one shots you can buy, and I will look for something that sort of matches the general theme of what I want to run, and then I will tweak it to fit the scenario. Often a lot of the even the games that I run for on our big events, so the ones that Ash writes, I don't just sort of deliver it verbatim. I will go through it and I will make changes to fit my presentation style. And I know that P's presentation is another one of the P's that we will talk about possibly today, or if not another day. But so the way that Ash writes it may not be particularly the scripted stuff. Mm-hmm. It might not come across the way that I would speak, so I will change it. And Ash is quite he knows that I will do that, and he's comfortable with me doing that. He's giving me, and John's used the term a template. He's given me a template to use, which I need. Mm-hmm. I'm very much dependent on that, the bones of a story. Oh, hit me mic. The bones of a story. But then at that point, once I'm really getting into it, I can see how I need to change it to fit my delivery. And that's pretty much what I do. So I know I use the term steal. No, I don't steal. I buy, or I use readily available free material. But yeah, sadly, I'm not at the point where I can actually write a story from scratch myself.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, part of that preparation, which you kind of touched on a bit, John, is the beats, which are the main kind of goals that are the aims for the players, or sometimes for you as the DMs, where you want to get those players to. So do you find it's easy to figure out when in the timeline those beats should come in, or do you leave that again kind of fluid with regards to we just have to get to it, but it doesn't matter when?
I think you need structure.
Yeah.
With a campaign, especially with a one shot. Well, I think it's equally true for campaigns or one shots. We mentioned pacing and talk about pacing, but you need to know when you need to be where. Otherwise, what happens is you end up with one of those news stories campaigns where this campaign's been going on for 50 years. There needs to be an end. There's got to be a conclusion, and if you're going to reach that end, and I think that's what you said, isn't it, John? You start with where you want to finish, and I'm the same. So I start with that finish point, and then plot those chapters, if you like, and work out what's going to happen in what order. So, for example, with a campaign for this podcast, I know what's going to happen at the end, and I've got all of those milestone points. One of which is discovering what you discovered last session, so I know that needs to happen.
We're all going to die.
Yeah,
that's a given, isn't it? Yeah. So, I think it's really important to understand roughly when they're going to happen, and not just let it happen naturally. Because with the way D&D players are, it will never happen, because they'll be off on some tangent, picking daisies from a wood for some old hag who's making a medicine to heal some noble's daughter, or something weird like that.
Yeah.
I think from my perspective, and again, I don't think one size fits all. DMs will chop and change based on their own abilities and their own mindset and presentation styles, etc. Personally, I think timing and pacing is more important in a one shot, because a one shot has got a start, it's got a middle, and it's got a conclusion. And if you don't pace correctly, you're going to end up without seeing the conclusion. So you're kind of finishing a story halfway unfinished, if you like, and I don't think that would be a particularly enjoyable outcome for the players. I think with a campaign, you've got a bit more flexibility. Okay, if you didn't quite get to point B at the end of this session, well, you get to point B at the start of next session. And okay, it might mean you're adding a week or however long to your campaign overall, but you've got that flexibility. I mean, as I say, that's only my view, and I've already admitted I'm not someone that tends to run campaigns, but from a layman, that would make more sense.
You're absolutely right. With a campaign, there's always next time.
Yeah.
With a one shot, there is no next time. It's this time, and only this time. And that's what makes our big games quite challenging, because you've got 12 hours of D&D, and you've got to finish on time.
Yeah.
And I'm constantly, Andy will know this. Have you run a 12-hour game, John, for us?
I haven't run a 12-hour, no.
Oh, you will eventually. You'll enjoy that. I'm always breathing down their neck. Like, I'll be coming around going, oh, whereabouts are you in the game? Are you on track? Trying to help them with the pacing and making sure everyone's where they should be. Because when that 12-hour day finishes, we've got players who come and join us from all over the place. I mean, Aya one year flew in from Singapore.
Yeah.
She's not going to be able to come back next week to finish the adventure. That's just not going to happen. So you're absolutely right with what you said, Andy. With a one-shot, got to get that pacing spot on.
I think the trick though is to have a template, isn't it? And know, for me certainly, is to know what works. I know if I use a 5-room dungeon with the intro messing about, players getting the quest and then actually getting there, that's about 3 hours ish. So if, like for the adventure days, they're 4 hours. So okay, I need maybe an extra 4 or 5 scenes or challenges or things that just slow that pace down and still drive towards that story or present alternative options. And if the players never hit that alternative option, that's okay, it's not a problem. But all of those things still drive to the same conclusion point.
Yeah.
I think, one of the things I might look at is, you know roughly how long each scene's going to be, especially when you're talking about sort of combat and the likes. I might have something in the middle that will be an enjoyable encounter, but if it doesn't happen, it's not going to impact the outcome of the story. So I've got it there, so if I'm ahead of schedule, I've got something I can pad the game out with. But if I'm running behind, I can completely cut it out, skip to the next chapter, if you like, and it won't, as far as the player's concerned, they won't know the difference.
Yeah. When we have new DMs who come to us to run, that's one of the things that I talk to them about, and we're leaking into pacing a little bit here.
That's fine.
But I call them speed bump encounters. So it's an encounter that you can put in to slow the pace down if your players are running away with it, but that equally you can leave out and it has no bearing on the narrative.
I think the trick sometimes, I've missed it certainly, is I've put those in too early in the session.
Yeah.
Like they're like in the first half an hour. I've got those speed bump encounters, and then you don't really know whether you need to run them or not. You need to leave them as sort of like optional near the end, don't you? That last half at least.
I mean, the only frustrating part of having to adopt that scenario is that you then look at your box and the 17 hours you wasted painting those minis that I was going to tell you all.
And we're talking about encounters. What kind of tricks or tips would you give people who are looking to run an encounter and aren't sure how to balance it or how to introduce it, how to run it?
It's an interesting one, that, because I've come to Ash several times for advice on balancing encounters. CR is quite good, I find. Fudging hit points when you need to, up or down. Sometimes, works. Occasionally you just get it wrong. And you get absolutely obliterated in the first bit, or vice versa. You're doing way too much damage and they're not touching you. And you need to adjust for that on the fly. Your players don't know the difference as long as you're careful about how you describe it. You don't say, oh, he's on his last legs, then add 300 more hit points. But yeah, that's the way I tend to kind of deal with that.
I don't know a DM that hasn't fudged rolls.
I
At the end of the day, if you know full well it's a bit too early in the story to sort of completely kill his party. So, oh no, I only rolled a 3. It was a nat 20, but I only rolled a 3, so he missed. Yeah.
So you're saying I should never trust your rolls?
Absolutely,
Okay.
I lie.
Okay.
And I'm bloody good at it.
I think just in terms of resources, obviously there's the XP and the encounter building in the DMSG. Sly Flourish has got quite a good chart based on CR.
Okay.
So it's the average party level. So if you've got like 6, I would use it for the adventure days where we've got more than 4 players. But it's like if you've got 6 level 10 players, then you get a CR budget of 35. But if you put a single creature in there over 20, you might kill them. Kind of thing like that. It's quite an interesting kind of model.
I think one of the things that you've got to consider as a DM, especially if you're a new DM, is that it doesn't matter how much preparation you put in, it's never going to go the way you plan it. You're always going to have to sort of adjust things on the fly. I remember one of my very first games, I had to entirely create a farm and the farm owners and an entire scenario.
What's that dog called?
I just made one little comment about, oh yeah, there's a farm over there, and they all decided to go and investigate the farm. What? No! Why?
Goes back to what I said at the beginning. If you describe something, a player's going to want to go and press that button on there and go, what's that doing then?
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. You've got to prepare, and I still think that again, different DMs will have different styles, and their preparation will very much differ. I like to have lots of figurines on the tabletop. Other DMs perhaps prefer using just little paper stand-ins. I like to have big digital maps on a TV screen. Others prefer printed ones. And there's no right or wrong. Absolutely, there's no right or wrong. You can enjoy a game on using any of those tools I've mentioned. It's just my preference because I'm a big kid and I like to have lots of toys.
And then from a player's perspective for preparation, when it comes to reviewing their character sheets and getting any kind of narrative tie-ins that you can, how do you approach that aspect? Because obviously I know it depends on the information that you get from your characters and their sheets. Do you find it's very collaborative, or do you kind of just take free rein with it?
Kind of depends on the adventure you're running and what you need from that character sheet to facilitate your adventure. So some adventures can be very forgiving with what the characters or the players put on their character sheets. Sometimes those you might get a character sheet back and it just look wildly wrong, like there's something not going on, something not right with what's going on that character sheet, and then that opens up a narrative with that player. And as part of your preparation, then what you're starting to understand is what that player understands about the rules. I didn't realise, I've got to roll 4d6 and drop the lowest one or the highest one or whatever you've decided, or they might have completely messed up the point buy system for their stats or something like that. So it helps you as a DM build where that player is within their D&D journey and their level of understanding, which allows you to support them better and make sure they have a more enjoyable time. And then it becomes a conversation going back to them and saying, well, look, this is what you were trying to do, it doesn't quite work out, how about this instead? And that's really important to make sure that they get the right things out of the game. Because if you just let it slide, you've got 6 20s as your stats, but then John's playing and he's done his standard array properly, now John's going to be penalised for that compared to the other player. Just making sure you have that consistency. But also understanding what those players can do is really important as well, because you might suddenly find that your players will have one ability or one thing that completely unravels potentially your entire campaign. So if you've got a mystery item that links to a god somehow or some way, and Andy's decided to play a Divine Inquisitor, well, they've got an ability that allows them to figure out exactly which god that item links to straight away, and then maybe 2/3 of your campaign's been unravelled because you didn't spot that ability.
And how would you kind of counteract that? Would it be a discussion of saying, okay, the ability will work slightly different? Do you not tell the player and then just do it behind the DM screen?
Do you mean if I'd spotted it ahead of time?
Yeah.
So if I'd spotted it ahead of time, you can plan it. So in that case, you could make that item more powerful. So rather than just giving them the ping straight away, you give them a clue which leads to them somewhere to find the information. So then you're driving the narrative forward with the information rather than going, oh shit, yeah, that's Zephon. That's like, well, no, they don't need to do all of that stuff. You spent hours and hours and hours preparing just because that one ability that you missed. So that's really important. Spells are a big one for that.
Yeah.
Look out for spells, particularly anything that can charm anything or read anything's mind. They can cause a problem for you as a DM. Or Moonbeam.
There's nothing wrong with Moonbeam.
It's
fine.
wrong with Moonbeam. I have a personal hatred for
Go
Moonbeam.
into a sort of a more sort of micro level, the fly spell.
Yeah.
The things that can fly can mess up an encounter massively.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've got them in some sort of volcano and then they go, actually, well, I'm just going to fly out the top.
So is
Great.
that why, for the adventure days and things, you put in those additional rules that we have in place for
The
certain abilities?
Global rulings, we
Global
call them,
rulings,
didn't we?
yes.
Yeah, and they've turned out to be really useful. So one of our War Council DMs, Niall, he's very, very good with the rules. And he's the person who I go to if I'm unclear on rules, or if we make something I want to make sure it's balanced. He's the person I get to look over it in the first instance. And he was able to point out these things which actually can massively break balance within certain encounters. Even to the point where the new 2024 stuff came out, there's a couple of bits in there now. I think there's a spell which can just be really, really crazy. I can't remember what the spell is. Can't remember what it is. You'll have to come along to one of our events and read the event pack to find out.
Hey.
But yeah, keeping that balance is really important. And fly is one of the things that comes up in that pack, isn't it? We talk about there being a limited use of the fly ability if you have a fly speed, because it can massively unbalance encounters. I think it's different if it comes from a spell, because you have to spend a resource then to use it.
And they have limited time, don't they? And things like that.
Yeah. But yeah, they're all in there to help. They're all in there as preparation to help make sure that those encounters are balanced.
And one thing that you mentioned that kind of links to the preparing for encounters as well is, like you were saying about if they've got abilities or spells, is to then maybe reassess what enemies they may be fighting, because you could see then, oh, this person's got a spell that this monster can just be charmed, and they've got a really bad saving throw, so maybe it gives you an option to review that and either choose a different monster or maybe fudge the results a bit on
There's
your side.
Third option there as well. Just accept it.
Nice.
If you know it's coming, you can just accept it. If that thing needs to be a null, why not have it a null? And if that's what the character chooses to do, then that's fine, but that's going to change the way the narrative works in the next few sessions. So you haven't got to... You're not playing chess with your players. Well, they could do this, so I'm going to do this. You're trying to build that narrative and that story, and if your players are taking an option or have the ability to use that option, and they choose to do that, as a DM you should accommodate that in the first instance. It's only when you're thinking further ahead down the sort of storyline, if it's going to massively derail the whole campaign, those are the times that I would change something, or change maybe a species or a monster or an ability or something like that. Because we should be rewarding our players who think outside the box and realise, oh, I could just try and charm him. And those little wins for those players, we've all been there as players, when you're around the table and they go, oh, we're going to try and charm him. Alright, I'll make the wisdom saving throw. It's a 5. Hey, he failed, excellent, now he's got to dance around naked, or whatever it's going to be.
I think
That's achievement.
What you can't do as a DM though is then in the moment just go, oh well, actually he's an elf and he's resistant to charming or something like that. You've got to be honest with it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to let players have that win, like you were saying, like Zeke with his Master Blaster, where he changes the damage type to lightning and then does max damage. That's awesome when that kicks off. You can only do it once, maybe, and it's at most once a session. It's once per long rest. So sometimes for us on our Tuesday night, that might be 2 sessions before he gets to do it again. So yeah, when he obliterates the big baddie that everyone else has been whacking with sticks for the last hour, brilliant, great, that's what his character does. And I think if you deliberately design an encounter where it's like, oh, actually he's got ring of lightning resistance, and that just got nerfed, you've just taken something away from your players, and that's not what it's about.
So it's like about that flexibility and that balance between what you need to happen to keep the narrative going, but also those things give your players the fun on their side as well.
You've got to prepare for it, haven't you? And this might now mean you have to prepare 2 different options. If my players do this, well, they need to do this. If my players don't do that, I can do this instead. So
Nice.
it's more work, but important.
So the 2 options could be kill the whole party or just half of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's you, yeah.
Yeah, if it's an Andy game, it's literally one or the other. There is no third option where anyone survives.
Because there is the illusion of choice as well,
Okay.
where they can pick an option, but ultimately the outcome is going to be the same. So whether they charm the enemy or not, they're going to get killed by another NPC in the next 2 sessions. It doesn't really matter. So their choice isn't irrelevant as such, but is less impactful than they believe in that moment. Because the DM, you can see infinitely into the future for your campaign.
Yeah.
You know what's coming. Andy thinks he's just uncovered a spoiler. The way he looked at me there.
I'm
Sorry,
now questioning many years of Tuesday nights.
What does it all mean?
I was just holding a fart in. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I thought that was the face.
The other thing I think you get from players' character sheets is what they want out the game.
Yeah.
Even if it's a one-shot or something like that, if somebody's created, I don't know, a pirate captain or something like that, they want the chance at some point to say, aha, get their hook and their parrot out and, you know, kick a bastard all over, swing from a chandelier. So put that crap into your game and let them do it. Like, it makes no difference to the narrative. The fact that the room they just walked into now got a big chandelier that the pirate can swing from, you know. It's fun. They love it.
Is there anything, when it comes to preparation, that you would say is the most difficult aspect to consider? Like the preparing for the unpreparable, as an example. And what do you have any examples of that?
It's the curveballs that players can throw you. Like, okay, so Tuesday night session, the current campaign, John and his mates are in a huge underground, well not huge, quite a large underground dungeon where there's cultists, and they're trying to infiltrate this cult and drive this cult out. And they know they've got to go into this room, and they've got to get into this room to save someone who's being suspended from a cage, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. There's Balguras behind them as well, coming down the corridor. It wasn't looking good, was it? It was looking pretty bad.
Really bad situation.
Their solution was to literally get TNT and blow a hole in the wall.
Oh.
And I didn't see that coming. So in that instance, as a DM, you need to be prepared to be flexible and think outside the box and on your toes and allow that to happen. So you could sit there and go, well, no, of course you can't do that. It's ridiculous. Don't be stupid. How are you going to do that? But if they can justify it and they want to do it, you can't prepare for that because you can't read their minds. You can't see into the future. The best advice I give any DM is be prepared to be flexible. Be prepared to run things ad hoc, not knowing quite what's going to happen. And it'll be just as enjoyable if you rule it one way and it's wrong, but the party still get to do what they want to do. They can have just as much fun as if you ruled it absolutely perfectly. The rules don't matter. The rules are a vessel to get that enjoyment across to the party.
Yeah.
So in terms of preparing for the unpreparable, in reality, I don't think you can. But being aware of what some of the options are can help.
I think it's interesting you use that example because that was the one time we actually had a proper plan in place before we walked into a shitstorm, because we actually knew it was coming. Like, we knew this thing, if we got this wrong, we were going to be dead.
Yeah.
So we actually come up with a proper plan, and I think it's probably about the only time the plan's gone off pretty well. Executed that campaign. So I think if you took that away and just went, no, you can't blow a hole through a wall. Well, we can see the map. Like,
and as
we
players,
know that room's there and this room's there. Like, we could justify it too, couldn't we?
Yeah.
As the players of that game, was it obvious to you that was a curveball that you threw, or was it like...
That whole dungeon was curveballs all over the place, I think, wasn't it? I mean, those two Bulguras come charging down the corridor, and I managed to charm them.
Yeah.
By impersonating a cultist and getting them just to go back to their room and not mash us, because that would have if they'd have fought, we would have been gone. It was touch and go.
I'm quite honest with the play. If players throw me a curveball, being honest that, oh my god, I didn't expect you guys to do this, is fine.
Nice. Yeah.
Because what that does as a DM is it buys you time.
Yeah.
Because if I now stand there for a good couple of minutes and just going, and don't tell the players it's a curveball, it makes it look like I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But actually, if I wasn't expecting you guys to do that, just give me a minute, let me just think this through, which I have said on Tuesday nights before,
Many
haven't I?
times, yeah.
Just let me think this through. Ultimately, buying myself that 60 seconds then makes the game more enjoyable longer term.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about that, it's about giving them a win, isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
As I've said before, this is a game. It's not them versus us. We're there as a facilitator to have, so that they have fun. We're not trying to beat them. So if they throw you a curveball, they're going to have a bit of fun with it. I mean, I had a game where, I don't know how they did it, but all of a sudden all the players were turned into Allosauruses. So the things that I was fighting, they were just being chewed up, but they were enjoying themselves. It didn't really have any impact on the end of the game. The end of the game was still the end of the game. The outcome didn't change, but they had so much fun in just the idea of and visualisation that they're all Allosauruses and they're chomping away at these beasties that I put on the table against them. Let them have it.
I think DMs get caught up on this curveball thing, because as DMs we feel like we're the ones that should be throwing the curveball. Like we're the ones that should be pulling the rug out from under the players, like, oh, you didn't see that coming, did you? And we should be all knowing and all powerful, but that's not the case at all. We're here, like you just said, Andy, playing the game as well. And I have the most fun when my players make me think on my feet. That's when I have the most fun, and I have to really kind of do some mental gymnastics to make it work. And our most fun on Tuesday nights are when you guys do that to me.
Yeah.
And we end up with these mad sessions. Like, literally, last Tuesday.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, stuff going on all over the place. But I think from a DM perspective, that also gives you things, the fallout of those events help you then, in a campaign, go, oh, well, hold on a minute. You just released a primordial fire being in the middle of a city, and that person's dead, and this person's over here blown up, and that one's gone. Okay, so then narratively, they're now annoyed at you. They think you're heroes, and these people want some other thing. So let's start weaving some extra narratives in from side, makes the whole world feel a bit bigger.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? It's taking the curveballs and then weaving that into your storyline and making it part and parcel, like it was meant to happen all along.
Then the final thing that I want to touch on with regards to preparation is something that I saw was being chatted about a bit in the Discord, and it's with regards to conversation. When it comes to running a one-shot or a campaign, when you know that there are going to be those RP moments of them talking to an NPC, how do you prepare for those? Because some people take the route of trying to script out the whole thing, which is, I think, a lot of work and can be very difficult. Whereas for me, I think you just have like bullet points of the main points of what they're willing to share, and then the things they might share if they convince them. And how do you kind of prep for that?
So if I'm doing a one-shot for like the adventure day, the only NPCs I put down are the ones that I actually have, like they are going to go and talk to the players and give them some information or give them the plot hook, or they're going to put us in a counter on a road or whatever it is. Those people have a name, and I usually just write down what they want and what they know, just as a couple of bullet points, and that's it. If I'm then describing like a room or something like that, and like the players go and talk to someone random, that's not prepared at all. Like it never is. But all I do is if I think that they're not going to get time for them to talk to the NPC I have planned, that person just knows the information the other one did, and
Nice.
that's kind of it. But yeah, never write speech out, because you never know what people are going to ask.
Yeah, you need to turn your NPCs into believable characters and parts of the world. They should all have personalities as well. So I will have roughly so almost like on your character sheets where you have bonds, ideals and flaws.
Yeah.
Almost those points, just briefly for NPC, a name and the bullet points of information they need to get across if they're important enough to be able to need to give that information is really, really important, because then they become believable.
Yeah.
They become real rather than me reading off a list of bullet points. And there's some great tools as well. So playing online has a lot of benefits. One of the websites I use when I run online games is an NPC generator. Oh, we're going to go and knock on that house. So I'll click the generate button and it'll give me an NPC, and they're not important to the storyline.
Nice.
But now I've got a name, I've got what they look like, where they come from, what their job is, and those resources again make everything feel real. And like John said, if there's someone that's important to the narrative, you'll do that yourself. You'll have that information. Just make sure that you can use it.
I saw somewhere, I can't remember where it was, but they were saying if you give your NPC an occupation, that answers a lot of your questions. So if they see a farmer in a field, they go and walk over, it's a lot easier as a DM to go, oh, I'm a farmer and 4 armed strangers have just walked up to me. Right, he's going to be a bit nervous of them, and then maybe he'll trust them, and he's going to know a lot about sheep.
Yeah.
That's just his occupation tells you an awful lot.
Yeah.
Is he Welsh?
Awesome.
Andy, any thoughts on that?
Only that if you have a big pile of notes, would that be preparation H?
So no thoughts on that then.
Bertie has had enough of this. No nonsense from Bertie this afternoon.
No, that's great, thank you guys. So moving on to the next P is quite a big one. We have already touched on it a little bit. This one is pacing. Pacing. Say it with me now.
Pacing.
So the main goals of pacing is to drive that adventure, drive that narrative forward. We have mentioned it, like the beats that you focus on, what they have to do, and when it comes to encounters, you have those ones you can chuck in or you can take out as and when it's needed. How do you figure out the point when a section of the adventure is taking too much time? What is the kind of indicator to you, aside from the obvious, I'm looking at a clock? Is there anything else that kind of pings to you that goes, okay, I need to speed this up or I need to slow this down?
Read your players.
Okay.
Look at the people around your table. Are they getting bored of what you're doing? Are people disengaging? Are they picking up their phones and looking at their phones, or are they on Facebook? Because then they're not interested in what you're doing. So actually now is the time to move things forward and refresh things, which is one way of doing it without clock watching. Obviously clock watching is really important, and understanding how long each section of your adventure take. Like for our episode we just recorded, I had a time frame in mind for each of those sections, so how long I wanted each one to last. Probably went out the window, but
Okay.
it's there as a guideline. But yeah, reading your party is really important.
Any thoughts?
Weirdly, I was going to say much the same thing. Like when you see people starting to check out a little bit, you know, whatever it is, the challenge, like get across a river. If they're still, and half hour later, still coming up with new fun ideas and having fun falling in and getting washed 100 yards down and climbing out and trying again or whatever, keep it going. But there is a point where you know that they've got so many more encounters to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you know your big fight's about an hour or whatever, 45 minutes. You know they've got to get back, you've got to close it down, that's another 15 minutes. A lot of it, I think, comes from trial and error. It's probably the right way of doing it.
And experience.
Yeah. But there's an awful lot of things you can say, you know, I'm putting these obstacles in, which the players might take an hour or 40 minutes to get through. But equally, if you think running out of time a little bit here, you can give them a hint or get them to make a perception check, and you noticed a ledge around that obstacle or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Combat is about the only one I think you can't do that with. Any sort of social traps, you know, environmental hazard, anything like that, you can get it. You can speed it up a lot easier than slow it down.
Yeah.
Really.
The worst culprits for affecting pacing are puzzles.
Yes.
Because a simple puzzle
Mm-hmm.
can take a group of 5 adults a good hour and a half to solve. As a DM, you need to watch that. When I'm chatting to new DMs about putting puzzles into adventures, I'll say to them, keep your puzzles as simple as possible because they'll take about 3 or 4 times longer than you expect them to. And still to this day, the best puzzle I've ever seen in an adventure was yours, Andy, when you ran Ancient Vault of Naggledir. And I'm not going to say what it was, in case he uses it again. It was brilliant. It was purely brilliant. Everyone was on edge the entire time. And at the end, in true Andy fashion, everyone went, ugh. It was great. I'll let our listeners come and ask Andy about his Naggledir door puzzle when they see you in the flesh, rather than spoil it.
I think, for me, there's a couple of points to pick up on. Firstly, my phone seems to be affecting things. So firstly, there is the point about reading your audience, reading the players. And actually, if they've got a puzzle, sometimes that can be more enjoyable than a fairly lengthy encounter. Mm-hmm. Because let's face it, most players, they'll get into a cycle. You know, if you're a barbarian, it's rage, hit, rinse and repeat, rage, hit, rinse and repeat. And there's only so many times you can do that when you think, okay, we'll roll the dice. Whereas a puzzle, you're constantly thinking of new things to try to overcome. So you're right, you've got to sort of hit the right balance of reading your players, seeing that they're having fun, because as I say, for me personally, that's the key objective. My players, I want them to have fun. Be all and end all. Nothing else matters to me. They have fun. So if they're having a lot of fun with this puzzle, let them carry on. And if an encounter is beginning to wane, fight dice rolls. Oh yeah, well, how do you want to kill it? Just so you can move the game on. So yeah, there's a lot of, I guess, craft in running the game and reading what's right for them, what is working, what isn't working, and adjusting it on the fly so that they get the maximum enjoyment out of it.
Do you think that there is any onus or responsibility a little bit on the players to help with the pacing? So for me personally, I am absolutely guilty of the fact that there have been games where I've played in and have felt like the group isn't moving forward and maybe the DM seems like they're struggling, so I will kind of, as a player, say something or do something, be like, okay, we're heading off now, great, we know what we need to do, we're moving, because it seems like there's a lot of nothing happening. Do you think the player's responsible?
I personally do. I think if we go back to our very first episode of the podcast campaign, I wasn't listening, didn't realise I had to speak to the mayor. You went to the pub, you got the instruction, just like, right, I need heroes, get off your asses, let's go. Sometimes it's needed to keep things moving, and I think it comes with experience from the player's end. Mm-hmm. Again, a lot of players that I've played with, sort of within charity and stuff, know, you can have a laugh, you can muck about, you can try different things, but at a certain point, you've got to, if you want to finish this story, You've got to start picking up those hints from the DM and get moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't always trust players. I actually confided in a player. There was a game I was running had a particular secret that I needed to get out, and the only way I could get it out was if a player were to die. Now, don't get me wrong. The game had an element of Dark Souls in it, so they would be resurrected, so they weren't going to be out of the game. So I confided in the player and said, look, when we get to this encounter, could you let me kill you so that I can, because there is a reason for it and you will be back, don't worry about it. Yeah, no problem at all. The bastard banished my big monster, so nothing happened. It didn't work. He knew what wanted to happen and he's the one that messed it up. And you know who you are.
What you've asked there, Bertie, is a really interesting question I hadn't thought about. Are players as responsible for pacing as the DM? I think they are, but not as much as the DM, to a lesser extent. Players know when they're dicking around, and where they're not doing stuff that's moving the narrative forwards. And sometimes that's okay. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in a long-running campaign, you're going to say something.
No.
Okay. If you're in a long-running campaign and you've got the time to do it, great. If you're in a one-shot and you haven't really got time to do it, come on now, behave yourself. Let's get on with this thing. Yeah. But equally, the DM then needs to have the confidence to say to the players, okay, guys, you've been doing this for the last 45 minutes now. What's next? Yeah. Where are we going? What are we doing? Because as a DM, you drive that story. So that's why I think the DM has slightly more responsibility than the players, but then the players' pacing responsibilities are to respond to the DM. Mm-hmm. Like, okay, yeah, you're right. We've been working how to shear this sheep for 45 minutes and not really got anywhere, so let's just bin it off and go and kill the lich.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Cause from my perspective, if we are doing the right thing, a good job as a DM, then your players are engaged. And if they're engaged, they're not going to be clock watching. They don't know how much time has gone, how much time they've got left to the end of the game. So they're not necessarily going to be aware that they need to speed things up. So at that point, it becomes our responsibility as a DM to make that call. Right, okay, guys, the sheep's they're being shorn, off you go, bye.
The players know what's coming as well. So if I think back to our last Tuesday night campaign, which was the Divine Essence campaign, the players had to fight an angel, in inverted air quotes, called Mendax. In that encounter, Mendax final formed, so he has another form beyond that initial one. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I want to make sure that we end this at the right point, so the players need to kill him or not kill him. I can't remember exactly how it's split over sessions now, but I didn't want it to sort of end sort of halfway through and be kind of jaunty, if you like. Mm-hmm. So the players didn't know that when we reached the end of that first fight and Mendax dies, actually he's coming back as a demon. So I need to allow for that within the pacing as well. So again, that goes back to what Andy was just saying. It's my responsibility as a DM to make sure that the pacing fits, because the players are invested in the story, which is killing the angel in this case.
I think that's actually a really interesting scenario to bring up, because the prefix to us going and fighting that angel is we just kind of saved one of the characters' towns, didn't we? And we were kind of on decompression, and then we got the message to say the angel wants to see us, and we had a long debate about if we go there, he is going to betray us. Like, we didn't trust him, it wasn't kosher. There was conversations about, let's just split the party, scatter with these pieces and disappear, which I suppose would have been an equally valid ending to that campaign. Maybe, maybe not. But we, as players, we kind of went, look, we met above table. All of us were going, we can see that it's going to end in a fight. Yeah. Like, it's going to end. This is the big showdown. We can see it coming, and we still went, you know what? We're going to go and do that anyway, because partly that's what you prepped, but that's also what we wanted. We wanted that big bang finale as players, and if we'd not taken the bait, as it were, like, we'd ruin our own story as players.
Yeah, we've all, I know there are adventures that have been run the charity where players have literally run away from what they perceive to be unwinnable fights, not thinking about what the DM's got up their sleeve. And in one of those situations that I ran, it was part of the mini campaign, The Rising Star, which Chris arranged, and it was the first time Otto Dawnblade ever made an appearance on his dragon, and it was meant to be a TPK. But Dave and I think it was Becca ran away literally fled with their characters, like, we're not staying.
Yeah.
We know where this is going, we're off. And that was interesting because the only way that they would have been able to understand that was knowing that my game was the last one in the mini campaign, and knowing what time the session was due to end. They could see what the inevitable outcome was. So then we're back to curveballs. They threw us a curveball and legged it.
And that was fun to be another player in the game as well.
Were you in that game?
I was in that
Ah.
game, because having them disappear, you're like, do they know something I don't?
Yeah.
Okay.
But that's an example of a time where what John just said about the party splitting, that's an example of a time where it worked. You've got two experienced players there who have read the situation, understood what's going on, and made that as a calculated decision, not a knee-jerk, let's fuck with the DM.
And it also was in keeping with the characters that they were playing, because my character, I stayed because my character stayed, because she was like a fully into the cult kind of thing. I'm going to be amazing at the end of this. I have to commit. Whereas they were like, I don't know if I want to be. So that was really cool as well, that element of it.
But that can backfire. You know, there are times when, as an example, the end of game baddie gives the players the opportunity to disengage and leave the cave with treasures abundant. But a couple of players decide, no, we want to fight. We still want to stay and fight. No, honestly, you don't have to. You can go. There's the exit. Bye. No, we're going to fight.
That may have been me and Chris.
Didn't end well for you, did it?
No, but if the rest of the party had stayed, I think we would have done it.
But I think as long as you've broadcast the fact that this isn't going to end well from you as a DM, if the players still say, you know what, we're going to stay and fight, it's absolutely fine to murder him. Like, as long as you broadcast, look, he is pokey. Even though you're 12th level or whatever, he's going to kick your ass.
You're like, does a 37 hit? Yes, that's 382 points of damage.
Are you sure you don't want to surrender, guys? No, okay.
Yeah.
That's the green light, isn't it?
Yeah.
Green light for a player death.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this was an Elder Sapphire Dragon.
Yeah. I was a gunslinger. I can't remember
Yeah.
what Chris was.
Level 5 or 10, I think.
Yeah. Good fun, though. That was the same adventure with the puzzle, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
So I suppose the only other kind of element of it is, we kind of touched on it a little bit, is how do you navigate the pacing without railroading the players into what happens next? How do you kind of navigate that element?
It's in your preparation. You need to understand what's vital for your story and what can be dropped. You need to understand how you can shorten things as well. So as part of your preparation, you should be looking at that route the hero is going to take and what you can drop to push that pacing on a little bit. Those speed bump encounters we've already mentioned. But also, when you've got a big fight, you want to look at that creature and work out how you can adjust if you need to. Because if you go into that fight and you don't really know how you're going to adjust the fight if the creature starts smashing your party up, so you just drop the hit points. That might work, might be fine, but equally it might not. There might be other ways you can do it, and you might be able to make the creature hit not quite so hard. But then you have to justify that with your players. If you've been doing 50 points of damage a hit, and now all of a sudden you're doing 20 points of damage a hit, why? What's the justification or flavour behind that? And that sometimes is easier if the creature's lost like 200 hit points. It's now weaker, it's hurt, so of course its attacks are going to be lighter. So that balances things in different ways. It's very easy just to drop hit points, but then you can end up with a really powerful character that does loads of damage on a hit, that just suddenly dies.
I think also something that is easy to forget is that if you're in a fight with a creature and you're hacking away at it, parts can come off. Like, just because you've done 200 points of damage, it's not just, oh, he's bruised and his ribs are broken. You could have cut one of his legs off, you could have broken his arm, and that kind of plays into it, which also I think helps with the immersion of the game, because you're not just going, he looking a bit rough, you're going, his arm's gone. Half of his face is caved in, but somehow he's still swinging at you with the other half of his face. And that's something as well, I think along those lines, is something you can kind of bring in as an idea for us.
Using those narrative points to adjust the difficulty of whatever it is you're doing, isn't it? So
That's exactly what I was about to say.
And I think another option that I often use is you have padders. So if you're running a little bit ahead of schedule, then have a series of little like skills-based scenarios that you can throw in, and that will eat up 10-15 minutes time and not have any real impact on the outcome. But if you're ahead of schedule or you're on time, don't use it. So as Ash said, it is about the preparation. Just having a little bit of some extra material you can throw in if you need to pad the story out, but by dropping it, it will have no impact on the story and the enjoyment of the team.
There's ways of doing it naturally as well. Like, it's going to be a bit of behind the screen thing for Tuesday night Streets of Dragonland campaign. When the group navigate from one part of the city to another, if we're ahead of where I think we should be, I've got a city encounters table that I make them roll on, and then we deal with that encounter. So the most recent one was someone was taking drugs and jumping out of a window thinking they could fly. Well, the party just came across that and ended up taking the drugs to see if they could fly.
Which again is a curveball.
Which is a curveball.
Which you can not prepare for, but you can enjoy and be flexible
Yeah,
with.
but it was fun. Yeah. And it lasts as long or as short a time you needed to, because something like that you could just shut down with the Town Guard.
Yeah.
Whenever you need to. But it's a fun encounter, and it fits with the story, so you're not shoehorning something in that doesn't work. And that's where we start talking about purpose, which is next time. Next time. But that's why that's important, is to make it feel a natural part of the story.
Yeah.
Like, your players should never look at that and go, Andy, chuck that in because we're too good. It should feel natural.
Yeah.
And if they did say that, I would kill them in the next encounter.
John?
So for me, it's about multiple routes. So when I think as a DM, I tend to over prep a little bit in terms of I'm always worried I'm not going to have enough content. So, and I work in flowcharts, so I tend to create like a flowchart where the lines between the boxes are the travels. That might be a corridor or an overland thing. Then the box is whatever the scene is. So the campsite, the entrance, whatever it is, the big boss fight. And I make sure I have multiple routes between it. So things like puzzles. I hate puzzles because puzzles tend to be, if you don't do this puzzle, you can't move forwards. Which means that if they get stuck or just need an hour to solve it, they're not going to, that's delay. There's no way around it. So if you're going to have a puzzle, have a secret entrance. And if it's taken a bit long, whoever's got the highest perception, you feel a gust of wind from the wall over there.
Nice. I like
it's a
that.
secret tunnel that goes kind of around the houses and bypasses the door.
Yeah.
Something like that. So you've got other ways of keeping it moving if you need to. And look for those blockers in your design, I think.
Very nice. I like that a lot. Final P is presentation. So for this one, we've spoken about it briefly in different circumstances, but for each of you, what do you feel makes you unique as a DM?
I'm a miserable old git.
Yep. Valid.
As a DM, not a person.
I'm a miserable old git.
Oh. Shall I start?
Go on then.
Shall I start?
Yeah.
Can I start at a charity level?
Of course. Whatever
So-
level you want.
I always talk about how our DMs have their own flavour and things they can bring to the game, and Andy's kind of alluded to this slightly, because obviously I write the big 12-hour games for November and then give it to the DMs, but actively encourage them to modify it and change it to fit their style. And a great example of this, the League of Heroes, which is running at the moment. So that's six adventures that I've written specifically for those 6 DMs that link into their style of playing. So Andy's doing one in December, and that adventure for Andy it's a very Andy adventure. Have you read it yet? No.
What, till December, I forget.
So it's a very Andy adventure, and the next person is Stuart. So Stuart is all about, as John will know from playing in Stuart's Tuesday night games, is all about keeping on your edge of your seat. It's all about that horror, that suspense. So his adventure is all based around that. Chris's probably can't talk about it. It's probably too inappropriate, but
Yep, that reads, that tracks.
It was very Chris.
It was very Chris, wasn't it? But they've all been written that way.
He had fun with it as well.
Yeah, as an organisation, we try and make sure our DMs offer something unique to their games when they run it, and they have that flavour to it. I could go through all of our War Council DMs and tell you how each one of them is different, but actually the best way to experience that is just to come and play in our events, and you'll get to know those DMs and how they work, and how an Andy game is different to a John game, is different to a me game. is different to a Nile game and how that sort of all fits together. In terms of me personally, within the charity, I think my games are easier to weave into the bigger narrative because I'm writing those big November games.
Yeah.
I'm writing so many D&D sessions. I can tie things into that bigger narrative more easily, so it's more likely that my players are going to have a bigger impact on the world potentially.
I think it's also because you have the most knowledge of it out of everyone. It's all in your head. So when it comes to the overall, it's a lot easier for you to link things because you know it more in depth than the other players as well.
I do try and get it out of my head, but there's a lot going on in there with the world.
Yeah.
And what you guys remember as well is we're not working like 12 months ahead. Like at the moment, what did that War Council update? How many years in advance did that go? 4? Yeah, it was solid. It was a solid 4 or 5 years, wasn't it? And then some loose plans beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's how far ahead we're working. And in my head all the time I'm thinking, when I'm talking to players, I don't want to give too much information. I want to hold some of it back, but I need to give enough. So that's kind of a tricky balance sometimes.
I have a question that I want to ask about that, and I understand if it maybe can't be answered.
Go on.
Has there been a time where something has happened in one of the games that has drastically changed or impacted that 4-year plan? Or does it all kind of fall along the way you want it to?
In an unplanned way, do you mean?
Yeah.
Like a curveball?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Not yet.
Do you think it's possible, or do you
Yes.
feel that things are strong enough being set that it wouldn't necessarily have that much of an impact because you're kind of planning for what happens?
I think both of the things you just said are true.
Okay.
So they are strong enough that they can stand on their own, but I think as people who look after the narrative as War Council DMs, if something happens that's cool, and it's cooler than what we had planned, you can believe the cool thing is going to be the thing that happens.
I think the other thing is, from when you're talking about plans 4 years ahead, it's not super detailed, is it? It's
No.
not. It's kind of this is what this is what's going to happen around that time. So what happens in the Nova big games and stuff like that can still, almost anything that can happen can still result in that kind of narrative thread through. It can impact it, but it still end up back towards that same kind of point.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually. So I guess, technically speaking, the answer is yes, it has happened then, because the game that's had the biggest impact so far is, I was going to say Thelsari Uprising, but Dark Ascension was pretty big as well. The most obvious, no, that's not true either. Let's look at Thelsari Uprising, right? So the players had a choice of aligning themselves with the Thelsarian Guard from Thelsari, Lady Oladan, or the Dragon Guard with Grand Commander Armand from Gloomcrest. And I was ready, narratively, for Armand or Oladan to die.
Okay.
One of those two, I thought in my head, one of those two is definitely going to die. And that's going to have a huge impact on the world. Their region's going to break up and it's going to be absorbed between the other regions. There'll be political things going on. It won't affect too much religiously because neither of them are massive religious players in that scene. But then all of our players actually fought for peace and became United Nations, and they both survived. So that did throw a curveball, and it wasn't the outcome I expected, but equally it didn't really change too much of what was going on because the state of play was the same. There was just more of an issue between those two regions. What that did change was the Heart of Glass campaign, because in the Heart of Glass campaign day from last September, that involved Lady Oladan from Thelsari, Mara in Oceanhold, and Watch Commander Fortulus, who's a Dragon Guard, so links back to Gloomcrest. And the relationship between those three regions is a big part of politically where the narrative is at the moment.
Okay. That's very interesting because having been a player for that game, it absolutely felt like we had to broker peace.
Yeah?
It felt like that was the only option because it wasn't one side was correct over the other.
No.
So it's interesting that you went, yeah, they're going to kill one of them, and we were like, you can't kill anybody.
Well, the way that ran was you had a DM with a table who were following the Thelsari storyline, and a DM for the table following the Dragon Guard storyline, and then in the last section those tables came together as mega tables, didn't they?
And it was that moment. It's that moment when you came through, because this is going to sound potentially cheesy, but I don't care. It's an incredible reflection of real life in the fact of you can have two different societies of people who are fighting for a belief that they think is right, and actually when you put them next to each other, they're exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
They're exactly the same.
Yeah.
So when we were across from each other, you start off thinking, these guys are my enemies, and then you're going, oh wait, they're acting exactly the way we are. They're following their thread. They're trying to fight for what they believe in. And realistically, in a fantasy setting, you have that opportunity to step above it and go, oh, neither of us are right here. We don't have to oppress them and beat them. We can just join together and get a better outcome. So it's very interesting that you were prepared for death.
Absolutely was.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I thought Mara was going to die as well in September. That was on the card.
Never.
No, Andy would have killed everyone.
But then again, that's Andy's style of DMing coming through, and how he changes the narrative, or not changes the narrative, how you affect the narrative through your style of running the game.
Yeah.
Fudge the rolls.
Fudge the rolls.
Yeah. So I think that kind of pulls
Andy loves
into fudge. Keeping it true to the lore of the game, which is something that is very important with presentation. Because Andy, you've mentioned you have your miniatures that you do, and that's something that is very heavy for you as a way that you are quite individual as a DM. Do you feel that that's your kind of staple? That's where you sit?
Yeah, I think there are two things that you will be guaranteed with any game I run, and that is a lot of jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And a very visual game. It's not just the miniatures. Yes, I've got hundreds of miniatures I use and paint and present on the table, but it's the maps as well. So I've got this beautiful bit of software, and I can create really exquisite animated maps with sound effects in minutes. They don't take long at all to create these maps. So I think that combination, it's a very visual game. And then, don't get me wrong, not everyone's going to appreciate that. There are going to be some people that are more about theatre of the mind, and if that's their preference, then great.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, you're never going to sort of please everyone. But that's just my preference, and that's the way I will present the game.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be a fairly shallow game, but but you'll laugh at some point, and then look at a model and go, "Oh wow!"
Or ew.
Oh,
which is sometimes it. How about for you, John? What do you think is your kind of staple?
See, I love the idea of the virtual tabletop, but the choosing maps stresses me out.
Okay.
I'm not kidding. I can write the adventure in 3-4 hours. I can then spend 2.5 weeks trying to find the right battle map. It's just not. It just stresses me out completely. So I tend to go to the big flip books of stuff in terms of presenting, and I again love minis, but because I'm using 2D and not, I've got doors printed and wardrobes, and so when I don't put anything on the table until something's actually happening. So if the group are walking into a fancy bedroom, I'll just describe it as a fancy bedroom, because what you're imagining in your head as a fancy bedroom is much better than anything that I can put down on the table. When a fight starts, alright, I'll go and grab the bed model I printed off, and a door and a wardrobe, and dump that stuff down, and then if something's happening, with minis. But virtual tabletop stress me out. Mostly because there's too much choice, and I can never find what I'm picturing in my head. I can never find the right map. It just upsets me.
And then when it comes to presentation of kind of you as the DM, when it comes to embodying the characters, so the NPCs and things like that, do you put a lot of effort in, and how do you approach that? Voices and physicality.
This is it. Deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's odd. When I haven't been into D&D for that many years now. Ash introduced me. It was probably sort of COVID time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I've been into tabletop and war games and board games for a long, long time, and I always looked at D&D and thought, I'm not going to do that. Sitting around putting on stupid voices. Now I embrace it. Literally, after the one little tester game that Ash put me through, I was like, where has this been all my life? And I love to visualise what that character would look like and how they would behave and what they sound like, and I'll do it. Sadly, I am old, and therefore I will forget what a character sounds like, and his accent will change over time. But hey,
I think everyone's guilty of that, though. It's not an age thing. That's just I started off Australian and ended up Jamaican kind of situation, which it happens to everyone. How about you, John? Where do you sit on the voices and physicality?
I'm kind of alright doing it. I got about maybe 4 or 5 voices, and then if I just go like deeper or higher, adds it out. But I'm a bit inconsistent. So yeah, if I start American, it'll end up Australian or something like that.
Yeah.
But if people are, I'll do them for NPCs and things when I'm in the game.
Do you feel it has a big impact on the games, or do you think it's more just kind of a bit of flavour?
So at the big games, where it's like Adventure Days, it was not 12 hours, but the ones we're running sort of for the charity, where there's people who I've never played with before, if I'm DMing and start off doing a silly voice, I think it's almost important for me to do it first to give everyone else permission.
Okay, yeah, nice.
Even if I forget to do it after that, the point is, like, permission's been granted to be silly. So.
Ash?
I'm not very good at voices, but I try. And the reason is it's, for me, important to distinguish for my players when they're talking to me, the DM, and me, the NPC.
Yep.
By putting a voice on, it doesn't have to be an accurate voice, it doesn't have to be silly or sensible or whatever. And it probably will change. If you listen to the first episode of Sebastian Lambry talking compared to the last one, they're probably wildly different. But I'm not being me.
Seb,
sorry.
There was
Seb.
genuinely a moment in the game that we've had, the last game that we've done, where you were talking. I don't know if you were started off talking as you, the DM, and then you slipped into Seb. But I was sitting there listening to you, like, okay, we're getting some lore drop, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm listening to Seb talking right now, because suddenly he's referring to himself in a different manner. I was like, okay, no, cool. That I'm getting the voice in there.
That's why it's important to
Yeah.
me. That's the main reason I use a voice. Not because I'm good at it. I don't particularly. The only voice I do enjoy doing is Zaphon. I do like a
Crack?
Zaffa.
Yeah.
Oh, Crack, yeah, but he's dead now.
He is.
Doesn't matter.
Crack was
His voice is amazing.
NPC.
Are you saying Crag or Crack?
Crack.
Yeah,
Okay.
K-R-A-K. He was an NPC that linked to Phil's backstory in our Tuesday night game, and he was a pyromaniac goblin artificer who ran round with bombs blowing stuff up.
Nice.
Yeah.
The voice was good though.
The voice was good, but I'm not doing it on the podcast, so
No.
if people want to hear me do the voice, they're going to have to come and physically ask me in person to do the voice.
Yeah.
Come to our events, buy tickets, it's great.
Nice.
Plug.
When it comes to presentation, is there anything that you feel is more important in a game to help that immersion and help your players get into it above anything else?
I have a golden rule for playing online.
Okay.
If you're DMing online, your camera should be on.
Okay. Yeah.
You should be visible as the DM. I think that's really important. And certainly when we're doing something really important or impactful, not on the podcast because we've got to worry about the microphones, but like on a Tuesday night, I'll stand up.
Yeah.
So I will DM from a standing position where there's something really important happening in the combat or talking to someone, to the point where there was one encounter on Tuesday night, I don't know if you were there or not, John, I can't remember, where this cult started blowing the city up.
I think that might have been my last one before I
Right.
disappeared off for a bit.
So the cult were hidden in amongst groups of people and were literally blowing up parts of the city whilst people were in the streets trying to do stuff. And the party were being congratulated by people, and so I left the DM screen, came round the DM screen, I'm shaking people's hands going, oh, thank you so much for all the work you did, it was great. And I just stop and look at the player in the eye and just go, roll a dexterity saving throw.
Oh, that's amazing.
And then I'd move to the next person and do the same thing, and then
Yeah.
I'd stop and look at them and then move on to the next person, so no one knew what was happening, what wasn't. But that's all
I've
presentation.
got goosebumps.
It's all presentation. It's all how you
Yeah.
present the story. It's how you present what's going on. And as a DM, you shouldn't feel like you're stuck behind the DM screen. You feel safe behind the DM screen.
Yeah.
But you can walk around the table. Yeah, there have been games where I've gone to the toilet or whatever and come back and not sat down behind the screen. I pulled the chair up next to my players, sat down behind beside my players and ran some of the game from there before. It's all changes the perception of you as the DM and what you can do.
You know, I've actually played an NPC who was a fortune teller, and I've actually come out and sat with the team with tarot cards, and I've done a magic trick that I know with these tarot cards as part of the story. So I think you're right. I mean, for me, there's a lot of pressure on the DMs to deliver. You know, at the end of the day, the success of the story is down to you. So it's all about the preparation and the presentation, whatever. So my advice would be do what is right for you as the DM. You're under enough pressure as it is. So don't overcomplicate things. Don't try and do things that don't sit comfortably with you. If you're not good with painting miniatures, and little cardboard cutouts are absolutely fine. If you're not good with creating maps or finding the right map, gridded paper. You know, use what makes you comfortable, what makes it easy for you to run the game. Because at the end of the day, if they enjoy the game, they're not going to remember what the map looked like or whatever, or the miniatures were like. They're going to remember the story and how you presented it.
Yeah, nice. John?
I was going to say, I think for me, the thing I try not to forget is there's a lot of power in your voice. So all the grand theatrics and card tricks and fancy VTTs and all the rest of it are great, but if you can, if you slow your voice down, talk calmer, it builds tension. If you're faster paced and things like that, it changes the feeling at the table. And I think players remember those feelings. They don't remember exactly who said what or what it, not straight away, but they remember that was awesome, or actually that little bit at the end of that campaign really got me. Like our first campaign, I talked to Martin about it, and he still almost gets teary. So it's like really sentimental little moments in campaigns and things. And yeah, I think it's the power of your voice, I think, that does a lot of that.
Yeah. Nice. Well, thank you very much, guys. That was 3 of our 6 Ps. We will be covering the other 3 on our next community episode. I've been Bertie, you've had John, Andy and Ash.
And I'm off for a pee.
Thanks. We'll speak to you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Right. And that's this week's episode concluded. It's time to thank our Patreon members. Our Ruby membership: Joshua, Alberta, Paul, Dave R, Claire, Laura, Jason.
Emerald membership: Stuart. Sapphire membership: Becca M, Gary, Neil.
Diamond Geezers: Zeke, Lizzie, Chris, Martin, John, Bertie and Ash.
And of course our Obsidian members: Ant, James, Becca GS, Ethan, Niall, Dave F, and finally our 2 ruling council members, Chris and Sophia. Thank you so much, all of you, for your support and for helping us do what we do.